Good morning, everyone. This is Morgan Hill, CEO and founder of Hill & Hill Financial. It's Monday, July 21st at about 8:15 Eastern Standard Time, coming to you with my monthly message. I've had a number of folks ask me about what's in this big, beautiful bill that has recently been signed by the Trump administration. So I wanted to share a few slides with you and a few thoughts. First, one of the key pieces of this legislation was the Tax Cut and Jobs Act that was passed a number of years ago. What was going to happen? Well, based on this new signing of legislation, which took place on July 4th, that has been made permanent. So certainly that has a big impact on annual tax planning. It has a big impact on those who are making charitable contributions out of their traditional IRA. So that's big news. The standard deduction increases from $15,750 for single filers and $31,500 for joint filers. One of the other things in there is there's an additional $6,000 deduction for qualifying seniors known as the senior bonus. So if your gross income is below $75,000, there's an extra $6,000 deduction that you can take based on the bill. So that's something that you want to talk about with your certified tax professional when you're doing your taxes to say, hey, do I qualify for that additional deduction, often dubbed the senior bonus? So a lot of good things coming out of that. It really erases a lot of the uncertainty. So those who are trying to do some forward tax planning, this is a big win. The next slide talks about U.S. tax revenue sources. One of the pieces of this bill was the federal debt limit increases by $5 trillion. Let me share with you, just as one taxpayer to another, this is certainly very concerning. You know, we've talked about kind of the credit card limit of the federal government, and I'm not here to get on one side or the other. I think we can all be on the side of that we, as a country, want to be fiscally responsible. One of the things that's challenging is most government spending are entitlement programs and defense, which are very politically difficult to change. Based on my notes, according to the Department of Treasury, in 2025, 21% of government spending is on Social Security, 14% is on Medicare, 13% is for national defense, and 14% is to pay the interest payments on our existing debt. And then you have children's health programs, Medicaid. So you're getting up close to that 75 to 80% of all of the spending is focused on those programs. And so it's very difficult to say, well, what do we cut? And again, I'm not taking sides. I'm just saying that it's very difficult, and this is certainly a concern. Historically, the prevailing wisdom has always been, if we increase prosperity and expand people's success, if you will, folks will make more money. If folks make more money, you've expanded the tax base, therefore increasing tax revenue. Well, that's the plan here. And we'll certainly have to wait and see that if these deductions spur growth, spur job growth, spur entrepreneurialism, that if that does expand the tax base, that will increase the revenue and actually make up for these shortfalls. But time is yet to prove that to be true. So although this was passed and it creates some issues for the future, certainly, it does eliminate some of the short-term uncertainty that the market has always been a little bit nervous about, of when they're trying to increase the debt limit. That at least solves it for now. But there's an old saying about kicking the can down the road. And my personal assessment is I do think this is some can kicking, but we'll just have to wait and see on this point. This final slide talks about federal estate tax. This new bill made permanent some thresholds for estate tax planning. Now, I know these numbers I'm about to share may seem a little absurd to the average human, but it made permanent the threshold of estate tax, $15 million for individuals and $30 million for couples. What that really speaks to is if you have more than that, there could be a federal estate tax that you have to pay. If you have less than that threshold, there are no federal estate taxes that you have to be concerned about. And quite frankly, I interact with a lot of people who've done very, very well. But there's a very small slice of the pie of retirees or soon-to-be retirees that are concerned about that estate threshold. one of the things that I think it does is it does settle down. Is this going to be good? Is this going to stay? What if I inherit something from my rich uncle? Those types of things. So it has been made permanent. And I think just kind of put to rest, is the estate tax provision going to revert back to lower levels? Knowing that it won't, I think gives people a sense of relief. And we certainly encourage folks, as we work with lots of licensed tax professionals, is now in light of this to make sure that we take the steps to make sure that we have a proper estate plan. So we do some really effective legacy planning so that those we love get our stuff when we're done, not perhaps those that we don't. So really the bottom line to this new legislation, it certainly extends and expands this low tax environment, which I think is good. And given that, I think it's important that we can kind of say, okay, now that this is settled, let's make sure that if we're doing charitable giving, we take those steps. If we're wanting to do some estate planning, we take those steps. As we're looking at just our normal tax planning every single year, what are we doing as it relates to earning interest on money that we're maybe not using? Does that create tax burdens? So I think the settling of this allows us to take some steps rather than, I know many of us have been kind of in a wait and see mode. Now we can actually take some forward steps. As always, 800-887-9647. Feel free to give us a call. As I shared, we do a lot in the area of legal and tax planning. We work with licensed attorneys throughout multiple cities and states. We also work with certified tax professionals such as CPAs to make sure that we're an assist with people who are licensed and credentialed in those areas, even though we have a lot of expertise. We work with those folks as well, or with the folks that you may have to really make sure that you've got that balanced plan of investing in income, proper risk management, proper estate, and proper tax planning so that you really have that retirement that you've always been dreaming about. I hope this has been helpful. Have a great week. And again, that number is always 800-887-9647.